When Nick was first born, he was fine, and 12 hours after he was born, he started to go a bit blue, and they took him into the intensive care unit. They couldn't find out what was wrong with him. They thought there might be some heart involvement, but they weren't sure. So we were sent home after about 2 weeks, and we thought everything was fine. When he was about 3 months old, he started looking quite waxy and pale, and he wasn't feeding very well. We had that problem, for quite a while. And we went to see a doctor who said, I think you need to see a cardiologist. We were visiting my parents at the time, so they were sort of 600 miles away from our home. So we went to see the cardiologist, who said, well, his heart's a bit enlarged, but when you get back to, back home, maybe you need to have him checked out. On the journey back, we started hearing this grunting noise coming from the car seat in the back, and he had gone completely grey, and he was grunting, and it was obviously that he was, it was obvious he was in trouble. So he landed up being in hospital then, and they didn't think that he was going to make it through the night. That's how bad he was. But he did, he pulled through, and at that time they still thought it was maybe a viral attack on the heart, something like that. It was only when he was almost 3 years old that we got a diagnosis. And he had been on the heart transplant list, and suddenly his heart function improved one day. And we didn't know why, and the doctors were elated, everybody was jumping up and down. And we thought, right, this is the end of it. It was obviously a viral illness, and now it's gone away, and everything will go back to normal again. But it didn't, and I knew there was still something else. I could see that he wasn't growing the same way that other kids, even with heart conditions, were growing. So I started this whole quest of finding out what it might be. And it was really by a pure stroke of luck that one of our doctors was testing him for something else, something called Cushing syndrome. And he phoned me up one day and he said, look, I'm going to test for this syndrome. It's very rare. I'm not even going to tell you what it's called. It's so rare. It's completely, he's 1 in 10 million that he's got this. So I said, no, please do tell me what it is. I'd like to know. So he said, oh, it's this thing called Barth syndrome. And so I went to have a look on the internet, and it said, oh, it's this lethal infantile disorder. And I thought, oh, here we go. And so we waited, and we had to wait for quite a few months for the genetic test to come through. But then they did, and it said that was what he had. In the beginning, I had thought that he wasn't likely to survive from what I had read. So it was living in the emergency lane all the time. We were always in hospital. We were always on high alert. We wouldn't let anybody who was vaguely ill come anywhere near us. And it was this constant tension and drama and worry and anxiety, and it was horrible. Then you start to learn how to deal with it, and you get hope, I think, and you realize that you have two choices. You either put your child in a bubble and you hope that he will then survive, or you let him go and live and you put a few safeguards into place, hopefully without him even knowing too much about it, and you say, go and play. I went to the internet first and managed to find medical papers, and started with the dictionary and started learning what all the medical terms meant, trying to make some sense of the journal articles, and then tried to make a list of all the doctors and the scientists who were involved to try and find people who knew about the disorder. At the same time, I managed to connect up with Shelley here in the States and a couple of the other mothers in the States. So we started swapping stories backwards and forwards. And yeah, that was the beginning of the whole journey for me, really. You learn the basics, I think, from the internet, but it can also be, you can learn the terrifying things, and sometimes it doesn't paint a picture of reality as, a child. It will give you a feeling of the disease, and it will be a disease. And then when you're looking after a baby or a child, that is a child, it's not a disease. So being able to speak to parents makes a huge, huge difference, because you'll be able to hear from another parent, oh, well, my child goes to school and does this and, I don't know, plays baseball or whatever, and yes, he gets tired, but he copes with it this way. And so you get to learn strategies for living as opposed to strategies for surviving, and I think that makes a huge difference. I think you have to be the sort of hub of the wheel in a way, because you're the person who's taking your child to see a neurologist and an occupational therapist and so many different doctors all the time. And these are doctors that don't speak to each other. So you need to be able to share the information that you've got from one doctor with another doctor and say, this is what makes up the whole of my child. Whereas you're looking at his heart, but there's all these other aspects that need to be looked at too. So you have to learn a little bit about all of those things, and you become quite knowledgeable. You have to become an advocate for your child, and you realize that you can take your child to go and see these doctors, and they're wonderful, wonderful doctors, but they've never come across a case of this syndrome before. And so you have to partner with them to be able to find the answers, and also you know your child. So you have to try and marry that instinct with the knowledge that you gain from this wonderful group of people and doctors to come up with the right solution for your child. You know, at the end of the day, your doctors become, you know, your lifeline. And I think you have to find a way just to work with them as a team. And if you can't, then they might not be the right doctor for you. I think for me, coming to the conferences, it's always an amazing experience because I get to see all my old friends and I get to meet new friends, and they are friends within 30 seconds, so it's lovely to be able to meet all of those people and see them again. For Nick, he gets to see the other kids who are like him, who understand him. He can sort of hang out with them and he can chat to them. He really looks up to the older guys a lot. Particularly as he's been getting older now and he's been starting to ask questions, and when he can see them doing normal stuff, I think it reassures him and it gives him a sense of comfort and security. So I got such a warm welcome from so many people, and I felt immediately at ease the minute I walked through and I met them. I had spoken to a few of them, or via internet, via email before, but I did feel immediately at ease with them. Everybody sits and talks about what their children like to eat and what their children do, and there's all those conversations that always go on. And with your friends at home, I think they can't really understand some of the issues that you have to face and things that you have to go through, whereas the people in at the conference, they really do. He was amazed to find that he wasn't the only one. We've had two instances where we had that. One was we went to a dream night at the zoo that was for disabled children only, and or children with disorders, and he turned around to me then and he said, "I'm not the only one who's in a wheelchair. Look at all these kids who've got wheelchairs." And that was a kind of aha moment for him, because he's the only one in his school, the only one in his town, so that is very isolating. When he comes to this conference, he said to me yesterday, he said, "Oh, Pedro just gets it. He gets what I'm feeling. He knows what I'm feeling. We don't have to talk about it. He'll help me out the pool, or I'll help him." And so it's a very special, special relationship. They lock in straight away with these kids, and they haven't seen them, but Nick was in the swimming pool yesterday, and there were a couple of other kids who were he was wearing fins, and they were trying to take his fins off him. And I didn't know who these other two kids were, and I was sort of going in there to try and find out a little bit about what was going on, and immediately I saw all the other Barth kids and their brothers and sisters just kind of form this pack around him. And they said, and they told these other two children to, please stop doing what they're doing. They obviously were just at the hotel. And they formed this close bond, all around him. And they said, "Come and play with us." And they sort of just took him away. And I didn't need to get involved at all. So I think that's kind of indicative of how it goes. I think Barth Syndrome Foundation needs people to join, because we're only going to beat this disorder if we work together. I think that we need every single affected family to at least let us know how they're doing, and we also need to give something back to them. There is, the people who are involved in the foundation, it's not, purely so that we can get something from the families, but there is a great personal satisfaction that you get from giving something back to them as well, because somebody has helped you along the way, and you'll always remember that person who was the first person you called or the person who helped you, and you want to then help the next person along the way. If you have just received a diagnosis and you come and visit the website, you're going to find a lot of information that's very, very useful, but you're not going to find the kind of information that's going to necessarily make your life easier. I think you need to be able to speak to people to help you along the way, to direct you to find a specific solution for your child, because what the information you get on a website is always very generic. And that helps to a certain extent, but you need more than that. You need to be able to talk to somebody else and say, "Well, my son is doing this or doing that, and these are the problems that I face. Where I live, it might be different to where you live." And that way you can find a solution that fits better for your child. And then we can also start to build a more complete picture, put the pieces in the puzzle and find out, what the syndrome is really all about. To be able to do that, we need to have as many people involved as possible. I find that Barth parents are very eager to work together, and they like to meet each other and to share the information that they have and to share tips that they've learned along the way, to give something back. And I think that they do realize that they are a key part of finding a cure one day. So they have to come together, and often the kids really adore being able to see each other and come together from that point of view, because it does mean an end to the isolation that they felt before that.